What is up, and welcome back to 24 Minutes of the Oscars, the podcast that takes a look at the 2024 Oscars 24 minutes at a time. I'm Ethan Simi.
I'm Ben Lawhorn. This week on the pod, we are maintaining our finest physical form and crossing the Rubicon as we talk about the Holdovers.
A cranky history teacher at a remote prep school is forced to remain on campus over the holidays with a troubled student who has no place to go and a grieving cook. This is Best Picture number 5. We're officially halfway through our Academy Awards Best Picture coverage and season here on this show. Before I get too far and lament about how we're already so far into award season, it feels like we just started, we have a wonderful guest joining us, Bryan Sudfield of the Film Fragments podcast. Bryan, welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
Stifle it, boys. I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, man. Okay, like I said, we're 5 weeks into this. Ben, I just wanted to check in with you real quick. We were looking forward to this for so long, and we get to talk about the Academy Awards again, and we've been guessing for a few weeks on Best Picture nominees. We now have our 10. We came out with an episode with our nomination reactions. We know the 5 that we're going to be covering for the next 5 weeks before the Oscars, but we're already halfway done with this thing, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, I can't believe it. To toot our own horn, I guess we did, or you specifically guessed 8 of the ones correctly that we had. You guessed all 10 in the official Gold Derby.
Don't sell me short.
That was awesome. But on our schedule, early on, you knew which 8 were going to be here. So it's crazy. We're halfway through. Nice to finally have the nominations though, and no longer, just be wondering what's going to make it. Maybe. I think people seem to have a lot of opinions on the nominations, and we've seen that on Twitter for sure. But I'm glad to be here.
Of course, Bryan, I want to ask you how you feel about the nominations. You're our first guest that's come on since the nominations have come out. Before you answer that question, though, I just need to know, because until we cover this movie on the show, I will be asking each and every guest, how do you feel about Maestro, Bryan? Be an ally, Bryan. It's not that hard. Be a friend.
Okay. I'll get the bad out of the way and then transition to the good. It's my least favorite of the Best Picture nominees this year. However,
That's terrible news.
let me finish.
Oh my god.
I like Maestro. I like all the Best Picture nominees this year. So even though this is my least favorite of the Best Picture nominees, I still like it. That's why I said I would start off with the bad before I transition to the good.
Nice.
I
Shot chaser. I like
don't know if I believe any of that, to be honest. I feel like you're just trying to let me down easy and just be
now,
like,
why
hey,
would
we're
I,
actually
now
friends.
why would I do that? Do I seem like the kind of
That's
person
true.
that would do that?
It's true. Yeah, I don't deserve that kind of coddling. How did you do on your predictions, Bryan? And I guess, what is the movie that you think is going to win Best Picture? What's the movie that you are the happiest to see included in this Best Picture nomination list?
I did pretty good with the predictions. In terms of Best Picture, I predicted all 10. I was pretty proud of myself. I mean, I definitely changed it up once the PGA 10 came out and everything.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty proud of myself. I did stuff with the outlet that I contribute with, the Rolling Tape, where we predicted all the Oscar nominations. I don't have the number pulled up, but I was in the high 70s out of 100%, which was, I'm pretty proud of myself there. I got 4 categories perfect, which sounds kind of bad, but I'm much better than last year where I did pretty terribly. This year I did much better. What were the other questions again? Who's going to win Best Picture?
Who's gonna win?
Oh, it's Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, of course.
My Oppie boy.
Oppie homies.
Which Best Picture are you happiest made it into this 10?
I'm gonna say probably Anatomy of a Fall. That's the one that I was very excited to see in there. I had a feeling they would get in, but I was still just unsure if they were even going to nominate either of those international titles in that and Zone of Interest, and I'm glad that both of them made it in.
Ben, you have not seen Anatomy of a Fall, American Fiction, Maestro, or The Zone of Interest. So you have not seen 4 out of our upcoming 5. Is that correct?
That is true, yes.
Wow. I am so excited for you.
In a huge coincidence, though, Maestro is also my least favorite of the 10. So that's amazing. That's kind of crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, it's just, what do you do?
You knew the whole time. I am also excited that they included Anatomy of a Fall. The more that I think about it, the more that I think Anatomy of a Fall is the biggest winner out of the nominations because it took home 5 nominations. It's pretty big key categories, of course, Best Director, Original Screenplay, Best Picture, those types of things. Sandra Hüller being nominated for Best Actress. So I feel like that is a huge winner and is going to be taken quite seriously. And I just feel like the more that I listen to people talk about it, the more that I think about it myself, Anatomy of a Fall is going to be the movie that disrupts things. I feel like come Academy Awards night. And if that starts taking home a couple of awards, things could go a little bit awry. Do I think Oppenheimer's still going to steamroll? I do.
Yeah.
But the categories that Anatomy of a Fall is in, things get a little bit contested. Ben, do you have any 3 days after thoughts? Because the last time we talked about our Academy Award nominations was Tuesday morning, bright and early. We're now recording a few days after that, or at least a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
Have you kind of thought about anything else, changed your feelings on anything?
I mean, I'm kind of surprised, but not really, I guess. It's just the blowback that Margot and Greta are getting for not getting nominated. It's
terrible.
I get it, but even for me, if you gave me the Best Actress lineup, I would throw in Greta Lee over Margot. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah.
Not that Margot didn't do a great job. I just think Greta Lee did a fantastic job. So that's not even the quote unquote snub I'm worried about, that's bothering me. But overall, I mean, I think they did a pretty good job. Like you said, it's Anatomy of a Fall getting 5 nominations has definitely made me more excited to see it and to check it out. And same with, Zone of Interest once we finally get it here. So overall, I'm okay with it. It's just it's amazing to see what people are upset about. But everyone that's upset about Iron Claw, I'm with you. I'm very upset that they didn't get anything at all.
Yes. Well, here's the interesting thing because, of course, as we know, studios really only have the capacity, the bandwidth, the funds, whatever it may be, to shoot for 1 or 2 things to be included in this, right? So of course, Netflix has Maestro and they ended up getting a couple Naiad nominations. They got a Rustin nomination. They've got a few there. We've got 1 Neon, Anatomy of a Fall. That's going for Best Picture. We have 2 A24 films this year, which is the only studio to get 2 movies in the Best Picture nomination list. Of course, one of those not being Iron Claw. Iron Claw doesn't get nominated for anything. And I feel like that's kind of a double-edged sword because A24 played their cards right. They got 2 Best Picture nominations. They got a lot of other nominations outside that category for those films as well. But it just wasn't the additional movie, I think, that people wanted to see included in this list. So it's kind of a tough situation. Brian, do you have any couple days after thoughts on these nominations?
Yeah, I mean, not to go on this topic for too long, but the whole Greta Gerwig, Margot Robbie, Barbie snub discourse is insane to me. It's insane. Obviously, look, I loved Barbie as well, and would they have been deserving? Absolutely, but the way that some people are talking about it, I saw this, and I'm sure you guys might have seen this headline too. So there was a post that went around from an IndieWire Instagram post, I believe, where they said Greta Gerwig is out, but Justine Trier is in. And the way that it was phrased made it seem like it was bad that Justine Trier was in, which in my opinion is so disrespectful. And again, maybe that's not how they intended to word it. They probably just made a mistake on their part. But, it's unfortunate that we're focusing so much on what missed instead of what actually got in, because there are a lot of really great nominations. Of course, every single year at the Oscars, there's always a film or a performance or something that we want to get nominated and it ends up missing. And yeah, it stinks that they aren't going to get nominated for the highest prize in Hollywood, but it's okay. It happens. It's not the end of the world. At least for me, that may be a bit of a hot take, but looking back at the nominations, I mean, there's more nominations I'm happy with than I'm angry with. I mean, I know that Ethan, you just watched Naiad.
I did. I also just watched Rustin, so I could cross all the acting noms off my list.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy with Coleman's nomination. That was very deserving.
Yeah,
but the Naiad nominations, Jodie's, and I think I might have told you this, I'm not angry that she got nominated. I mean, I wouldn't have nominated her, but it's not oh my God, this is a terrible nomination. Whereas the star of Nyad herself, yeah, terrible nomination. But really, I mean, I had no complaints really with many of the nominations. Of course, there's some things I wanted to get in. I mean, Ben, like you said, Iron Claw, I'm pouring one out for them. Like, seriously, they deserve so much better this season. But a lot of great nominations. And yeah, I mean, on the top of my head, besides Annette Bening's nomination, I can't think of a nomination that like really ticked me off. I could think of things that I wanted to get in, but really, besides that Best Actress nom, there's not that many that really just ticked me off. Maybe that Best Score nom for Indiana Jones, but you know, hey, I can't be mad at the old man. I can't be mad at him.
It's a tough beat. Much like you guys, I agree that this discourse with the Greta and Margot omissions has been quite substantially toxic and has definitely teetered on like not beneficial in the slightest to Margot, to Greta, to the cast of Barbie, to like the state of movies in general. I think it's quite perplexing what happened, and I just like I did not foresee like the tides turning in 24 hours where Twitter just became a cesspool of people backlashing against the Academy because 2 people missed out on nominations. I think it's really wild, and I think it does go to show that Anatomy of a Fall is an interesting juxtaposition to Barbie because Barbie was the movie of Twitter. Like that was the movie of the year for social media and for, you know, the people going to the movies for the first time in a long time or whatever it may be. In my opinion, and I don't really know if this is a hot take, but this is like an unpopular opinion for sure. I definitely think Justine Triet is much more deserved in that category than Greta is.
I agree.
Not to take anything away from Greta, because I adore her films and I adore her as a filmmaker and an actress and a person. I just think what Justine Triet was able to accomplish with Anatomy of a Fall, which of course we'll talk about here in a couple weeks on the show, is much more substantial and does go to show like this highly kind of like quote unquote Twitter pilled like take on what the Academy Awards should be or who should be nominated because a French courtroom drama is not Barbie. And so I find that very fascinating. I do agree that the Annette Bening nomination is wild and I don't get it. And I get it from like the Academy's perspective of like, hey, we like Annette Bening. But I was substantially let down by her performance in Nyad. And you know, there's that. I feel pretty good. And I think the Best Picture slate is like the best picture slate we've had in like 10 years or like it's a long time, 15 years.
Ever since they re-expanded it to 10, it's definitely the best lineup that we've had in a very long time.
And here's what I find really interesting is some conversations around this have been like, okay, look out because this backlash has happened. And now, of course, people are going to be saying, we need 10 directors and we need 10 actors and we need to expand everything, which I think is absolutely unnecessary and complete garbage. And this argument that a movie doesn't direct itself is also horseshit. Sure, a director directs a movie. I understand that, but there's 5 Best Director nominations and there's 10 Best Picture nominations. That's just life. That's just how they get recognized. And, you know, in the case of Margot, I think a lot of people are forgetting, like, she's a producer and, like, Greta's a producer on that film. Like, they've been nominated to be producers. Producers make films. Yes, directors direct films, but producers put them in action. So
and she got nominated for writing it, too. Like,
great.
You know.
I think it's a win all the way around. So, let's move on and talk about The Holdovers, because this episode is specifically about The Holdovers. Bryan, I know this was one of your favorite movies of 2023. I'm really excited to have you on for this episode. What do the Oscars mean to you? Do you watch them every year? Obviously, you predict things. Do you have a party to watch them? How do they influence your life?
Yeah, the Oscars are my Super Bowl. I mean, I get excited for the Oscars every single year. I always try to explain to my in real life friends and my family of why I get so excited for the Oscars. And they're like, why do you get so excited for this award show where it's just, you know, people get awards and everything? I'm like, well, why do you get excited for the Super Bowl? It's just men tackling each other with a ball. Like, I mean, I get why they get excited for it, but no, the Oscars are just something I love to watch. They celebrate film. I obviously grew up loving movies, and I've been following the Oscars for a little over 10 years now. I
Mm.
watch them every single year. I didn't really do any Oscar parties until I was in college, and then after college, I would really travel to places to watch the Oscars. Last year, I was in LA during the Oscars because the Oscars last year happened to be on my birthday,
Mm.
which in my
Wow,
opinion was a
nice.
major win because a good fucking movie won Best Picture last year. So I was
This is
very
true.
happy. It while it wasn't my number one movie of the year, it was my number two. So, you
Mm.
know, we won regardless. And I was very happy that night. And of course for A24 as well. I mean, they had a hell of a night last year at the Oscars. But I love the Oscars. I love watching them every single year, even though the politics behind them and the discourse behind them gets unfortunately worse and worse year after year. But that won't stop me from watching it. I keep saying, "Oh, the Oscars are fucking stupid," and yet I'll keep watching them because that's just what I have to do. They nominate the movies that I love. They celebrate the movies that I love. So I have to see the actors and the filmmakers and all these other people get recognized for their incredible work. And then I could also laugh about the terrible work that gets nominated or possibly win at the Oscars.
Mm.
This is true. Don't let the entity hear that you disagree with it being nominated because it'll probably come after you. Ben, last year you came out to Portland and we watched the Oscars together, and that was really fun. We haven't discussed our Oscars watching plans yet, so I don't know what we're doing for the Oscars.
Should we do
this
it
year.
here on the pod? Should we hash it out? Let's
Figure it out right now. Book those plane tickets, brother.
Let's
Come on
go.
out.
I mean, yeah, I want to come back
I
up
got
and watch
miles
it.
to redeem. I might head your way. Who knows?
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm excited for the Oscars. I think the closer that they get, of course, the more excited I become. I'm just really like fingers crossed that they do some cool shit this year. Like I think like they should have, you know, good duos presenting and like cool music and that kind of stuff. You know, fingers crossed. We'll see. Probably not going to happen, but anything's possible. The Holdovers nominated for 5 Oscars this year. Pretty impressive. Here's what it's been nominated for. Of course, Best Picture. Best Actor in Paul Giamatti. Best Supporting Actress, Davine Joy Randolph. Best Original Screenplay and Best Film Editing. Brian, out of those categories, do you think that the Holdovers will win any of them?
Absolutely. I think it has at least one Oscar locked down. And I feel like we'll talk about it in the episode, but it's definitely not walking home empty-handed. There's no way. It would be an incredibly big shock if it doesn't win the award that it seems to be likely to win.
Right. And of course, I think you're referring to Best Supporting Actress, which we will talk about after we talk about the movie here a little bit. Ben, I know you agree with that take as well. Paul Giamatti versus Cillian Murphy. How are we feeling? Because every week that the Oscars gets closer, it feels maybe not more of a toss-up, but it just feels like more of a little bit of an unknown that might throw a curveball in like the Oppenheimer takeover.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I still think Cillian has the edge on it. I think the tighter race might be Best Actress, but I think Cillian has it. But Paul is deserving. Like rewatching this movie, like it's a wonderful performance. I'm glad to see that it got original screenplay. It was written by someone named David Hemmingson, who, as looking at his IMDb, he's only ever done TV. This is his first movie he's ever written. So that's pretty amazing to get nominated for an Oscar for your first film screenplay. And again, like as someone who edits for a living, I'm shocked at this nomination. Like I don't really get it. Like I get it, you know, because good editing you don't want to see. But I was just like, man, I'm kind of surprised at what this got over some other movies. So yeah, you know, I'm with Brian. Like I think supporting actress is a lock. But if anything else, it's probably actor that it might get.
Do you think Paul has a shot, Brian, or is it all Cillian all day?
It's tough to say. Paul is my personal favorite lead actor performance of the year. So, of course, if he were to win, I would be very, very happy about that. I do think that I mean, it seems like it's going to be a close race between him and Killian. I feel like depending on how the rest of the season goes, I think we won't really know if Paul could win the Oscar really until the SAGs.
Mhm.
Once the SAG happens, if Paul gets that SAG award, then his chances of winning the Oscar increase
Skyrocket.
tremendously. They skyrocket tremendously. But I don't know. If it's not either him or Killian, I don't know what's gonna happen. But as of right now, I have Killian winning actor, and I would be very happy with that. I mean, obviously Oppenheimer was my favorite movie of last year, but again, it would not be a disappointment if Paul were to walk away with the Oscar. Obviously, he's never won before. He's been in the business for a long time. This has been a long time coming in terms of nomination. He was robbed of an actor nomination 20 years ago. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, you could ask me tomorrow and maybe I'll say yes, but right now I don't think he's gonna win actor. But I'm not gonna be shocked if he wins actor in the long run.
The Academy does like that narrative of saying, "Hey, we righted our wrong that we messed up 20 years ago, and now we can feel good about ourselves." Killian, I mean, kind of a similar boat. Like he's been around. Like this is his shot, right? This is his chance, and it feels like a pretty standard narrative, and actually a lot of categories is like, is this the only chance this person will have to take home an Oscar? Of course, we kind of see that with Lily Gladstone, Killian. There are those narratives like floating around. Speaking of SAG, it looks like that's going to be on February 24th on Netflix, so we can stream it on there. So we've got quite a ways to go. That'll be just 2 weeks before the Oscars. So they're saving the blow for the final couple weeks there for the Academy Awards. Anything's possible. I think Paul's got a shot, like you said. If he takes home SAG, I think things change drastically. I don't think he's gonna take home SAG. I really feel like Oppenheimer's got the juice. Dave Joy Randolph, of course, I think has it in the bag, and I don't think it is going to win anything else in the categories that it's for. So, going to take home one, could take home two. Well, we will see. Any other Holdovers Academy Awards thoughts before we get into the movie?
You don't think it has a possibility of taking home the screenplay Oscar?
I think it's all Anatomy of a Fall, baby.
You think it's all Anatomy in the Fall?
I just think it's got too much momentum with the Golden Globe win and Justine Triet being directed. Payne missed out on directing. I just feel like it doesn't have what it takes in that category.
That's an interesting point. That's definitely a valid argument to be made about how, because it won the Globe and how there's all this buzz surrounding Anatomy of a Fall and everything, it could take home the screenplay Oscar. I have a feeling, though, that if Anatomy doesn't win, I don't know. I feel like this would be the one to have the best shot. If it's not Anatomy, I think it would be this. I don't really buy Maestro winning screenplay. Past Lives, I would love to see that happen, but I'm not sure if that would happen. And then who else got nominated in original screenplay? May December. Now that would be a deserving win as well, but it's tough. It's really tough. I mean,
we're gonna talk about best original screenplay here in a couple of weeks here on the show when we cover Maestro. That's what we're gonna kind of connect with that movie. I am curious, and I wonder what you think, Ben. I feel like I disagree with Brian. I think if Anatomy of a Fall doesn't win, I just have a sneaking suspicion that Past Lives takes home the win in this category.
That's what I want, and that's what I hope. So I can't tell if I am separating my head from my heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'm not sure, but that's what I would love to see happen for sure. Like people who've listened to this pod, any episode for the last 5 weeks, have heard me say it's my favorite movie of last year. So anything you can get, I'll take.
I think there are some truly substantial moments in Past Lives that might set it apart in that screenplay race. That if you watch the stream when things were nominated, the 2 times Past Lives got called out, hearty cheers from the crowd. Whoever's in that crowd, it's probably not substantial members of a voting body, but it could be indicative of how people might feel. And of course, Greta Lee not being nominated for Best Actress, Celine Song not really being in the conversation for Best Director, our sad boy John Magaro not having a role substantial enough to even break into this supporting actor race. Same thing with TOU, like just not being in the conversation. I wonder if that sees the win in original screenplay. Like I said, I still think it's Anatomy of a Fall. And we will, of course, do like one final episode just a couple of days before the Academy Awards come out of like what we think is going to happen, what we feel like is gonna win, and trying to like take stock of everything like 48 hours prior to the show. So this is, we're still like 7 weeks out here. Anything is possible. Do I think Maestro is going to take home screenplay? Absolutely not. But you know what? Still a Maestro boy. I got to do what I can. Let's talk about The Holdovers. We're going to break this down a little bit and do some true cinema. We will start with kind of this juxtaposition of scenes, starting in Mass, and kind of understanding Davine Joy Randolph's character and her son kind of passing away with his service in the military, and then Tully, our main character, getting a call from his mom saying, "You're not coming home this break. You're being held over." And these two identifying themes of loneliness, abandonment, sadness happening in two very distinct manners. Bryan, tell me your thoughts on this scene and this introduction to The Holdovers.
I love the way that we're introduced to these characters. I love how with both of them, you get these different sides of them, to where with Mary, we're introduced to her just working in the kitchen and everything, prepping for everything as everyone's about to go home for the holidays and what have you. And there's this very subtle moment. The music had already stopped for a few minutes, and then she just happens to look out the window, and then the camera's like zooming towards the window. Mm-hmm. It's very subtle. It's very quiet. Then all of a sudden the music just slowly comes back in, and you could like sense that, okay, like we could tell that something's going on with her. We don't know what. Like, if you walk into this movie not knowing anything, like, you could tell that something is up. And then with Tully, when we're first introduced to him, he's packing up for the trip and getting ready and what have you, and he's throwing all these comments and saying like, "Oh, I was with your mother last night," or blah blah blah, something like that.
He's got some good. He can serve it, by the way.
He really
quick.
He really can. He really can. And then we cut to him in the classroom. You could tell like, oh, he's such a smart aleck and everything. Like he's a smart student and what have you. But he's very cocky and a little bit rebellious. But I really love the way that we're introduced to Tully and Mary. I think those are great ways of introducing the characters. I mean, I remember when I saw the movie at TIFF, and I remember everyone was talking about how like these were great introductions and everything for these two characters. I mean, obviously we'll get into the character of Paul very shortly, I believe, but I really, really love the way that we're introduced to these characters without being told so much. I like that we're not being spoon-fed so much within the first 5 minutes. We get enough, but we're not overstuffed with information about either of these characters. We learn a bit more as the movie progresses about the two of them, which I really appreciate.
Ben, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great intro. I don't know that I have much to add to what Bryan said. The only other thing I want to talk about was how interesting it was on this rewatch to clock the fact that both the teachers and the students call him Walleye. Like he gets zero respect from anybody at that school. The teacher that kind of lied about what he's got going on is like, "Oh, I can't stay here because my mom's sick," or whatever. Just
dirty play.
So
and then it cuts to the mass and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry about your mother." He's like, "What?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. That. Yeah.
It's so good. And then the whole classroom scene and how, Tully ends up getting them more homework and things like that. Trying to lighten the mood, like, well, I got us out early, but I just thought it was an interesting way to meet Paul and just be like, oh, no one gives this guy any respect in this school. Like that's who he is. So that's kind of interesting, but great intro to all these characters.
Yeah, agreed. I think the only two things I want to call out, this is my first and only Alexander Payne movie I've ever seen. So I don't have a great frame of reference for like his other things or other movies that Paul Giamatti has made with him. And I kind of hold that in like high esteem. Like I like that this is the thing where I'm just like, Oh yes, Alexander Payne and Paul Giamatti, like the Holdovers. This is great. Of course, I will watch the other things eventually. And I just wanted to call out the use of the song in the beginning is excellent. Big like I know it's not like Scorsese vibe, but it is like kind of core like Scorsese vibes. So like needle drop this song 3 times in the same movie, twice like within the span of like 15 or 20 minutes. So big vibes of The Departed, of course, and kind of using that song to set the tone in these types of things. Dominic Sessa in this movie, word is that he was found at this college that they were going to shoot
high school.
And he had never acted before. I believe he's like a theater kid, but they were just like, hey, you want to be our guy? And like, I mean, a week ago, he was like kind of on the brink of like, hey, maybe he'll get an Oscar nomination, which I think is insane. I love Dominic Sessa in this movie. I think he's totally dynamite. We'll talk about him more, of course, as we go through the movie. The next one I have on the list is the smoke break, why everyone is being held over. We get the introduction to kind of like the big range of ages and personalities. We're going to meet Kuntz and this kid named Alex Ullerman, this kid named Park, and everybody has like a different, really kind of traumatic like reason that they're being held over, where it's just like people don't care. And of course, Ben, like you mentioned, like Paul gets no respect, Paul Hunnam, and that's like the mode of the movie. It's just like people don't respect these people and they don't value their time, their companionship, their relationships that they have with them. And I like this scene quite a lot because it does feel like it encapsulates that big 70s, vibe that, of course, Payne and Focus Features and everybody was going for with this film, where they're just like talking about what's going on. And I really enjoyed that. Ben, this scene, good, no good?
I mean, I thought it was great. We got a little insight into who these characters are. Even, with Tully kind of calling out that other guy who calls Park. I mean, I forget what slang he uses, but pretty disrespectful. It's like, okay, so this guy will stick up for other people. That's interesting. And as someone who grew up in the Mormon church, it was funny to see that little kid, be like, oh, I'm a Latter-day Saint, I'm a Mormon, and just hearing about why his parents were like on a mission, which like in real life would never happen, but it's really funny to hear it used in this movie like that. But I thought it was a great introduction to this group that I think for the most part, we don't know, like we assume we're going to be with them throughout the whole movie. And so it's a great way to get to know who Angus is going to be around this entire time. Obviously that changes, but really good introduction to everyone. Horrible introduction to that wig. That wig is awful, unfortunately, for that football player. But other than that, everything's good.
Would you shave your head if it meant you didn't have to be held over? Cut your hair, I guess. He didn't have to shave. He just had to cut his hair. Yeah,
it's just hair. You know what I mean? Why not?
Wow, that's a take. I don't know if it's a pretty luscious locks. I don't know if you risk that.
Yeah, I mean, he had nice hair for sure, but first getting stuck with all those leftover foods and things like that for 2 weeks, I don't know.
Maybe not worth it.
Yeah.
Well, it panned out to not really be worth it in the end because his skin got fucking obliterated by the wind. Him and Kuntz both just ended up losing that one. Brian, anything you want to call out about this scene?
I love how all these students are so drastically different from one another, and I really like how you bring up the age of how like you have these 3 that are definitely like older teenagers, then you have these 2 much younger kids there as well, and I really don't you have to wear some kind of magic underwear or something? that's just a room. But also just like, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about Dominic Sessa's performance in a little bit, but specifically when it comes to like these scenes where it's all 5 of these kids interacting, and then he's like, oh, where's my picture? And he's like, why are you here, Kuntz? Where's your family? And they're like, oh, we're renovating our house. And he's like, it's winter, idiot. No one renovates their house in the winter. Just like that line may not necessarily be funny, but just like the emphasis that he has on the word winter. He's like, it's winter, idiot. Just, oh my God, so much rage. I love it so much. I love the sequences with all 5 of them. And I will admit, it definitely caught me off guard because when I was watching the movie for the first time, I'm like, isn't there supposed to only just be 1 kid? Why is there 5 kids? Like, what? did the marketing lie to me? Like, what the fuck, movie? But no, I love the sequences with all of them together. There's some really nice moments, particularly one of the sequences where Park, he accidentally wets the bed and has a nightmare. Yeah, and that's definitely one of the more moving moments. And then of course there's a nice joke thrown in it where he's like, fucking asparagus.
Yeah. Totally brings a lot of sass, but he brings a lot of comfort, and I think that's crucial about his character.
He's a lovable asshole. That's what he is.
Yeah, this is true. Next on the list, the first dinner, where Hunnam blows up at Kuntz. And this is the first time you get to see Giammati really unleash as Hunnam and just be like, oh, cool. So like people are just keeping him down. And he just like kind of feels a lot of bitterness towards like the world and people treating people like people treat him. And I think, of course, it's very, very telling. He sticks up for Mary in this situation where Kuntz is bitching about the food. Kuntz is just like A1 elite asshole in this movie, which works for me.
Yeah.
You gotta have you have to have that key ingredient of that kid who is just irredeemable, which is him. But I really like the scene because it finally opens up a little bit about Hunnam and like how he might feel about protecting certain people around him or feel towards other people, and breaks a little bit of those walls down. Anything about this scene like stand out to you guys at all?
I just thought it was a beautiful scene, honestly carrying over to later when he goes and joins her watching TV, joins Mary.
Oh,
and
yeah,
she,
the newlywed game.
Yeah, and she thanks him for what he said and stuff like that. I also like that she calls him out then. It's like, oh yeah, my son had you. He hated you. It was kind of funny, but it was nice to see him stick up for her and just like kind of lose his temper there for a moment and just like get all that emotion out of him, and get a little fear of God in Kuntz as well. It's like, you can't just say everything you think. You don't need to anyway.
Yeah, I love the scene as well, and there's a lot of emotions sprinkling throughout. For one, just anytime you see Paul Giamatti have an outburst, it's great no matter what the context is, whether it's for comedy purposes or dramatic purposes. But I do love seeing how, even though he comes off as someone who doesn't have a lot of respect, it doesn't seem to respect a lot of other people. The fact that he does respect Mary and feels for her in the midst of her grieving and what have you, I really liked how he stood up for her and just screaming at Kuntz and everything. And, saying a pretty spot on line, life is like a henhouse ladder, shitty and short.
Yeah.
Like it's the truth. It's the truth. And, I love how, Ethan, you brought up how, we need a character like Kuntz who's like kind of the asshole, like the straight up asshole. Yeah. And I like what Mary says about him, especially that little Kuntz kid, crown prince of all the little assholes.
Can I ask you guys, and maybe it's just, I rewatched this movie like a week and a half ago, so maybe I've forgotten and I didn't write it down. Do we know anything about Hunnam's personal life? Like, was he previously married, or is any of that information revealed?
He was close to getting married. He talks very briefly.
What I thought.
It was later on when they watched the Newlywed Game the second time.
Okay.
Where she's like, what about you? You ever get married? And he's like, no, I was very close. I like being alone. I don't really find the interaction with people or the time to be with people to be what I love to do and what have you.
I find that aspect of Hunnam's character very fascinating and very interesting to kind of posit ideas of like, I wonder what happened there, and I wonder how close he actually got. Like, I wonder if he was like abandoned on the altar. Like, I wonder if it got to that stage, or like what traumatic event caused him to think, I just like to be alone and I'm just better off not being hurt. And I think he is a far and away much more complicated character than I thought the first time that I watched this movie. Where it does, as the very logline of this movie states, that he's just a cranky history teacher. He is, but I think there's much to be unpacked there that is just not unpacked. Ben, you brought up the Newlywed Game, and I quickly just wanted to bring up this line that Mary says talking about him writing a monograph, which, in case you didn't know, is not as long as a book, because I love how they reference that a lot. She says to him, "You can't even dream a whole dream, can you?" Or I believe, or Tully says that to him. Someone says that to him in that moment, and I think that is a very strong guiding light to Hunnam's character for the entire movie and how he deals with things, thinks about things, unpacks things, and eventually is able to maybe escape that veil at the end when he does stand up for Tully and he does kind of fight back against his boss and these types of things where he's unlocked the ability to dream a full dream, which I think is really interesting. Next one on the list, I have the kids leaving the chopper. Tully's the only one left behind. Brian, you mentioned you thought it might have been all 5 kids staying over the whole movie. This is where we finally crack down to Tully. All the kids go in the chopper, which for me, it works, but I think it's exceptionally outlandish for this movie to be like, that's how the kids left. The one rich kid in the chopper, and like they all fit, all their bags fit, and all these things. Where I'm just like, okay, all right, I get it. You had to have Tully be there alone, but like a chopper, come on, guys.
Kind of fun though. I mean, super rich parents, like all of a sudden these kids are holding over, and now they get to go on a ski trip. So I think it's just more salt in the wound for Tully of having to stay behind. Definitely the emphasis of that scene, but also a little salt in the wound for Paul because he doesn't get to relax now for the next 2 weeks. Now he still has to babysit one kid. So I'm with you. It's kind of, far-fetched, but I think it's effective.
Yeah. I agree. And I love how you just brought up how it may suck for Tully, but it also sucks for Paul because all he wanted to do was spend the rest of his vacation reading mystery novels. That's all he wanted to do. But
the simple things, he can't even get that.
I know. It's really unfortunate. But no, it's funny that you say it's outlandish, Ethan, because I thought the exact same thing when I first saw the movie. It was such a minor nitpick, though, that I was able to push it aside. But I've seen this movie so many times since. I watched it multiple times in theaters. I watched it with my family on Christmas Eve. And, the entire time I was thinking to myself, I'm like, if I was a parent, I don't know if I would want my child to go away with a family that I don't even know. I don't know how I would feel about that. I know it's just a movie and, not all movies make sense and what have you, and they do outlandish things, but that's a very minor nitpick for me. But yeah, I don't know. It's something I could brush aside, but now that you bring it up, now I can't stop thinking about it. I don't know if I would feel comfortable with my child when on a ski trip with a family that I don't even know anything about.
Yeah, see, this is interesting because Hunnam calls all the parents, and in theory, all of the parents are like, yeah, you're good. Like, hop on the chopper and get out of town and go on this ski trip so you don't have to hold over, which, like, I don't know. If I'm Park's parents, I'm just like, so we didn't trust him to fly and join us, but we trust him to fly in someone else's chopper and go somewhere else without us. I think it's a little interesting.
I guess because like he would have been flying all by himself, and I guess because he's with other
flying
people,
with a group. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay.
But even still though, still.
Next, we have the almost fight in the diner. Now, this happens after Tully crosses the Rubicon, after he breaks his shoulder, I believe, or injures his shoulder. They have to go to the hospital, kind of do this whole like dad shtick, which I think is really funny. The first time we get to see Hunnam kind of being like his own game being played back at him, which I think is really interesting. And then they go to the diner. Of course, I adore the Miller High Life conversation we get here, the champagne of beers, which I think is great. And he tries. This is also where we get to see one of the teachers, Miss Lydia Crane, working a second job while the holdover season is happening. She knows to bring Paul a double Jim Beam, which I think is also really funny.
Only charges him for a single though.
Oh, fucking crucial play.
The hookup.
That's the hookup. Honestly, the double for the single. Totally almost gets into a fight with these guys over pinball. And I like this scene. It feels a little bit lengthy to me on the rewatch. I was like, whoa, we're in the diner for kind of a long time. But of course, it is a very crucial, pivotal plot navigation device to like push Tully and Hunnam closer together and make them kind of fight this common evil in these two guys that are going to fight Tully. And, you know, I think it works. Ultimately, it works, and we get a very nice car scene after this. But thoughts on the diner scene?
I think it's so interesting here that after the whole exchange happens and they're outside and he throws him the keys, he's like, do you have any idea what it's like to lose your hand, you know, and like have your hand blown off? And it's so interesting because Paul, he has this sympathy for these like war vets and these other people, but he has no sympathy for these students at his school.
Yeah.
Like he can't imagine that they're going through any hardships.
Right.
Like if you see someone that's lost their hand, he's like, oh, that guy's had a hard time. Let's give him some grace. Let's like, you know, whatever, I'll buy you a beer. But he just thinks all these kids are spoiled little shits. Obviously that's like, you know, the whole running theme and what happens throughout this movie. But I just found it really interesting on the rewatch again. It's like, oh, he's not an asshole towards everyone. He's just an asshole towards these kids because he thinks they're all like douchebags, you know, that shouldn't like get what they have. But if you see someone in actual, you know, peril or that suffered before, he has the empathy there. I thought that was a really interesting kind of dynamic. Just like kind of show us like he's not always an asshole, just really to these kids. He fucking hates these kids, but to other people, he's cool.
Yeah, he brings up a point during that exchange outside of the bar, diner, restaurant, back to the car, where he's like, how many boys do you know had their hands blow off? Barn boys don't go to Vietnam. They go to Yale or Dartmouth or Cornell, right, whether they deserve to or not, except for Curtis Lamb. Like, that's a very important line to be brought up. And yeah, like you could sense that Paul obviously he doesn't look at all children this way or all younger people this way. He just tends to look at the ones that were very spoiled as like, oh, you guys don't appreciate the value of life. You guys take everything for granted while everything is being handed to you and spoon fed to you. And daddy's writing these big checks so you could go to the school even though you don't deserve to go to the school.
Right.
It's a very interesting perspective to look at. And I love this whole exchange with the two of them. And I love how this is kind of really, I mean, we got some elements of this at the hospital prior to this when he, you know, broke his arm and everything. But I like how now at this point in the movie, we're trying to like really get the two of them to somewhat understand one another. And this is really, I think, the first time in the movie where that's starting to make fruition, where it's starting to come into play. And I really do like that perspective. And again, I just love how a majority of the scenes where it has these serious, tender, laid-back moments, a nice joke comes in and it really, really lands. Before we get going, can I be candid with you? You smell like fish.
Yeah. Here's my take. Pinball guys are in the wrong. Tully was right. He put his dime down. He gets the pinball game next. Let's just clear that up right now. Tully was fine. Hunnam should have bought Tully a beer because my guy just broke his fucking shoulder, went through this whole thing, got you out of Dodge at the hospital, saved your job, and you're like, no, I'm not going to let you have a Miller High Life. That's too much. You're asking too much here. I think that was a mistake on Hunnam's part. Of course, here, also that idea, like both of you brought up, that impacts Hunnam because Dr. Woodrup, we get that conversation in the very beginning. Dr. Woodrup runs the Barton, the school that they're at, and basically has that position because he played the politics game and because he might have abandoned some moral obligations along the way to uphold the ideals of Barton, something that Hunnam has continuously fought to do and thus has not been rewarded for so, which is this social juxtaposition of like rewarding the wrong people for the wrong things. And so I think Hunnam's quite bitter about that and uses that to really inflict like his point of view of the world. And that comes up quite continuously in lots of these scenes with him, who deserves things and who doesn't, and why people get things and why some don't. Next on the list, I have the Christmas party. I will just say about this Christmas party, this is where Davine Joy Randolph wins her Academy Award. I had my best friend pass away last year in January, and I think the representation of grief and pain that she displays in the exceptionally brief moments that she's on screen to display that is powerful, and it is very accurate and strikingly well done. And Paul Hunnam's face in this scene when Christmas music is playing is probably the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Okay. Like literally, when I saw the movie at TIFF, it had only shown at one place, and that was Telluride. This was like a week after it had its world premiere.
Sure.
And I remember when I walked into the screen for this movie, someone who had seen it at Telluride was about to watch it again. And they had said, and I heard them talking about this with somebody that they were with, there is a shot on Paul Giamatti's face that is literally going to break your heart.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm like, I'm not ready for that. And then when we got to that scene and just that look on his face, it is so devastating. And I know it's overused now online. Every time it's like, oh, Paul Giamatti won this award and won that award, blah, blah. It's just that particular image. And I'm like, okay, we have other images that we can use. But I get why this one's being used. But the thing that really stuck to me immediately after I saw that movie was, again, something very, very subtle. Something super subtle to where what is playing in the background when that happens? It's the most wonderful time of the year. They claim that the holidays are the most wonderful time of the year. And he finally was somewhat connecting with this person in Lydia Crane.
Crane.
And then all of a sudden, like you think like chemistry is happening. You think there might be something, and then it turns out that it's not. And just you hear the words, "It's the most wonderful time of the year," as he's just looking all sad on the couch, and it breaks my heart. And then quickly transition into that scene where I agree with you, Ethan. That scene where she's breaking down in the kitchen. That's her Oscar clip, hands down. That's what gets her the Oscar. It's one of the best portrayals of someone grieving that I've seen on the big screen in a very long time. And just how she delivers the line, "He's gone." Oh my God. Fucking wrecked me. Truly wrecked me. Like, the entire time, Mary's like, you could see her quietly grieving, but she's really hiding it. And this is really the first time where she's letting it all out. She's drunk. She's at a party. A song plays that that has a connection with her and her son. And she keeps playing it back. And everyone's like, could you please change the music and whatever? And she's like, back the fuck up and what have you. And then we just cut into the kitchen, and it's so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah, it's an amazing scene. If anything, I was surprised at how brief it was.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm like, okay, here comes the monologue. Like, it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait for this. And then the scene just like cuts, like, oh shit. Okay. Like, I thought for sure we were getting to something else here, but I don't know that it was necessary. Like, I think she was able to get across all those emotions just in that short amount of time. And on the other side of it, to juxtapose the party, totally kiss someone, he's having a great time, he's like, cool, I want to go back. Like, let's drop her off and let's go back. So a real interesting, 1 and 2 there.
Hunnam gets absolutely robbed in this scene, by the way. Like, Lydia Crane, terribly nice woman, quite good looking for, he works with her and has a connection and repertoire with her. And her and her husband are just, sparks are flying when he comes home. And I feel for my boy. Like, he just
husband, boyfriend, we don't know. We don't even know if she is married. We don't know if that's a boyfriend, fiance, husband. We have no idea.
Well, all we know, it's not Paul Hunnam, and that's where she did us wrong. Okay, next on the list, I have the bookshop in the museum in Boston, of course. Totally convinces Hunnam to take him to Boston. Mary uses that as kind of an excuse to go back home and visit her family and kind of confront her traumas and demons that she's tackling this time of year as well. Very fun stuff happens in Boston. I love their escapade. We get another movie where we get to watch people watching a movie, which I think is a big win. And the bookshop, where we find out that Paul Hunnam's loins used to burn red hot. And that is incredible screenwriting to me. Just really fucking good stuff.
Mr. Tully, for most people, sex is 99% friction and 1% goodwill. Call me old-fashioned, but I should place value on physical intimacy, and so should you. Curl your toes!
Gross. So brutal.
What does he call it? He's like, you want some candy cane? Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
candy
pretty
cane.
funny.
And then it cuts to the museum where they see that one shot. He's like, it's candy cane.
Yeah.
Good
Good scene. I like them. They're coming together. They're forming a connection. And I think which makes the next scene even more powerful because Tully visits his dad in a sanitarium, essentially, and we kind of get the background on Tully's dad and his family situation. And just one day, basically, his dad just kind of like started acting weird and forgetting what was happening. And it's interesting to see the evolution of the relationship between Tully and Hunnam, and then Tully take advantage of that, which is not something that I really foresaw in this movie, and really goes in a different direction than I anticipated. Of course, Hunnam ends up kind of coming on board, but he tries to sneak away after things were going so good, which I thought was, a nice diversion, I think, and a nice spice to like the final act of the movie.
Yeah, I thought it was wonderful, ditching out of the movie to get out of there. And I mean, this is also after we as the audience have seen their connection with their depression medication,
right?
Which was kind of interesting too. It's like, oh, when I got low energy, I take this. Like it's for depression, right?
It's like, oh, you got me rye bread, my favorite, rye toast.
Yeah, so good. So it does kind of come out of nowhere. It's like, well, yeah, they've been getting along. Like, what the fuck's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
But I think their connection leads to Hunnam like going with him. He's like, all right, I'm going to give this kid a chance. Like, let's see what this is about. Obviously, he thinks he's going to a cemetery, so that's kind of an interesting dynamic as well. But I thought this played really wonderfully for me.
Yeah, it was very, very beautifully handled, and I really like again how they. I did not expect this to be how it was going to pan out. When he yelled at him outside of Lydia's house that his father was dead, I assumed that, okay, his father is dead, like actually dead. But what I didn't expect was that his father was alive. He's in, like a mental hospital or what you want to call it. And, he's not the same person he was that Angus remembers him being. And I like how, this entire segment of them in Boston outside of the school, it was a nice change of pace. I thought it was a nice way of getting out of the school just for, more than like 5 minutes when they went to the party or when they went to the hospital.
Yeah.
Like it was a good 25 minutes of them outside of Barton. And I like how they get closer and I like how things get moving and what have you. But I think everything with the father was handled great. I would have liked a little bit more with that. I'll be honest, but I think what we got was really great. And then it cut to my favorite monologue of the entire movie with them in the restaurant and just him saying of how, how Angus's mom looks at him differently and how he says that when she looks at me, she sees him as in his father, and she's worried that he could become like him. And that's so depressing. That just thinking about it right now is making me teary-eyed because like, there are times where we ask ourselves, are we going to be like our parents, whether it's the good side or possibly the bad side of our parents? We love our parents more than anything, but all of us have our own demons and we all go through certain things that we may not necessarily want to go through. But just that line of how he thinks his own mother doesn't love him, that is so devastating. I cannot even imagine like being in that position where you as a child think that your parent doesn't love you the way that they should.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack for sure. Here's the thing, though: his mom is an asshole. So
Absolutely,
there's that.
I agree. I
So
agree.
I think that's a large portion, of course, of why Tully feels the way that he feels. The last thing on the list here is kind of this resolution where Tully's parents come to Barton. They find out that he went to visit his dad in Boston. Tully and his mom and his mom's new dad or new partner. And they basically threatened to send him to a military academy, which is exactly what he didn't want to happen from the very beginning of the movie. I do feel like we ended this resolution rather quickly, to your point, Brian. Like, I think we move fast, like very quickly from Tully's dad to like, oh, wow, Tully's mom found out about it. And now we're like resolving all of the things. But outside of that, of course, we get a very tender moment between Tully and Mary outside of this office of like, we don't know what the future holds, what's going to happen. And, Hunnam ends up sticking up for Tully and kind of mouths off to the president of the school and an all-timer insult. And we get a really interesting look about what each character values about the other person, of course. And we get to find out the correct eye to look in for Hunnam. So a big win all the way around.
That was like, and people could laugh about the whole eye thing and what have you, but just the way that Giammati delivers what eye is the correct eye, it's so tender. It's tender and it's so moving. And for some reason, people are like, why are people getting emotional during this? Because it's, it's full circle. It's full circle.
It's a big character revelation as well. Being able to let his guard down and share that information with not one person, but two people, and being that personal with somebody about something that people don't respect him for and something that really makes him the way that he is, which I think is interesting. Ben, what'd you think of the kind of the final scenes and resolution of the film?
I mean, the eye reveal was awesome, but I just think, some of the most touching stuff is just them at the car there at the end, just connecting with each other. That was, I think he says like, I forget exactly what he says, but he's like, I was going to tell you the same thing, like take care of yourself or whatever.
Keep your head up.
Keep your head up. Yeah, exactly. He's like, I was going to tell you the same thing. I thought that was just a nice way for them to connect with each other as they part ways.
Yeah, it was good. I like a lot of things about this movie. And of course, we talked about a lot of them. I'm going to kind of go off script and choose my true cinema moment to actually be the end where we get to see Hunnam drive away, realizing a full dream and moving on from Barton, somewhere he's been his entire life, freeing something up in his life. And of course the thematic elements that go along with that, but that also incorporates him stealing the exceptionally expensive liquor from his boss and spitting it out as he drives he crosses his own Rubicon outside of the school Barton, and outside of Barton and basically uses that to memorialize like, this is who I was and I'm moving forward in my life now. We don't know anything outside of like this little sliver of life that we see with him, these few weeks or whatever it may be. But that is a great wrap to the movie. And both times when that happened, I was like, oh, that was cool. Like just like this good, very good, like feel good 1970s flick of like, that's how it should end. Like that makes sense. That totally checks and tracks and all these things. So I like that part quite a bit. True cinema moment, Brian?
True cinema moment. I mean, there's so many to choose from in this movie, but I think for me, I'm gonna go with one of the more underappreciated moments in the movie, and that's the sequence where, they go to the museum and everything, and then he talks about how, people really don't like you. People hate you.
Yeah.
And, they played The Wind by Cat Stevens, which automatically, if you play that song in anything, the waterworks will commence. That's just going to happen no matter what. And I found it to be a very beautiful moment. And then he reunites with his college roommate, where we learn, how Paul had this scholarship and he was at Harvard of all schools in the world. And then he got kicked out because he ran his roommate over with a car, and then just subtly the cashier at the liquor store is like, take care, killer. There you go, killer.
So sick. Yeah, that was a good one. Ben?
I mean, mine ties into that. It was running into the old roommate and just totally kind of keeping him on his toes. Like, oh, you're writing a book, right? Why don't you tell him about it? What's it called? It's about cameras, right? You know, like, you should tell him. So I liked that. And it's like, what was all that about Barton Men Don't Lie? It's like, well, that was a private conversation leading right into what Bryan was talking about.
It wasn't private. The wife and I were standing right there.
Yeah. I love that scene.
Yeah, that is a good scene. I mean, quite a great movie, honestly. The thing about The Holdovers is that I think it immediately entered the pantheon of like Christmas films, and I love that. I think it's fantastic. Coming out in 2023 is tough because 2023 is one of the best years for movies we've had in quite some time. So like, outside of like 2 or 3 films every year or whatever, talking of like the best picture slate of these 10. Like The Holdovers being in this conversation is warranted. I think that just goes to show like how deep of a year it was for film. I like The Holdovers, and I was really glad that I rewatched it. I'm excited whenever the opportunity comes up again to rewatch The Holdovers again. Like, I think it's quite a feel good film. Of course, streaming on Peacock right now, which is really exciting. We mentioned Davine Joy Randolph, her Academy Award scene, her clip, whatever it may be, and how we think she's going to win this race. So let's talk about the Best Supporting Actress race just for a couple of minutes and kind of go through this. This is the first time we've talked about a race where we've had the 5 nominees, and we haven't had to guess. We haven't had to say who might get in, who might get out. So, of course, we've got Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, America Ferrera for Barbie, Jodie Foster for Nyad, and Davine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. Any thoughts before you say who you think is going to? I feel like we all think Davine is going to win. Any thoughts on like this slate? I know we briefly touched on like the Jodie Foster of things. Bryan, do you have any thoughts on like the America Ferrera situation we have going on here?
I'll get to that last. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'm very happy that Emily Blunt is here. I know a lot of people talk about how she didn't really have a lot to do in Oppenheimer really until the third act. That sequence where she goes off onto Jason Clarke, and that scene is incredible, of course, but she's always been a great performer, and it's great to see her finally get her flowers in a long overdue nomination. I didn't love The Color Purple, but I'm very happy for Danielle Brooks. Danielle Brooks was easily my favorite thing about the movie, and I've loved her for a long time as well. And I love how someone who so prolific on stage and then on television and as well as film is now getting her flowers as well, for being Oscar nominated for a role that won her a Tony, which is essentially the Oscars for theater. So that's a really, really cool thing. Jodie Foster, we talked about that very briefly. And then America Ferrera. Okay. Oh God.
Tread lightly.
I'm treading lightly. Okay. So I like America Ferrera a lot. America Ferrera is kind of a staple to the Sudfield household. When I was younger, I would watch Ugly Betty all the time with my mom and sister.
Sure.
So I naturally like America Ferrera is a huge staple to me. I did not think that she was even going to get nominated at all. I know there were some people out there predicting, maybe she could sneak her way in. And I'm like, I don't know. I know why people are predicting her, but I don't know if I think they're actually going to go the distance and nominate her. And the fact that they did, would she have been in my 5? No. Do I think she was very good in the movie? Yes. Do I think the nomination is deserving? I have conflicting thoughts. Again, I wouldn't have nominated her over certain performers. I'm not necessarily annoyed that she got nominated, but it's definitely the one where I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, it's not the worst nomination. It's not the best nomination either. It's much better than the Annette Bennett's nomination. Anyone out there, I saw a tweet saying that this nomination was worse than Annette Bennett's, and I'm like, are you on crack? I literally pulled an Ethan. I'm like, are you fucking high?
Are you high? What are you doing? Ben,
but no, I like the lineup. It's not my favorite, but I have no qualms. Like, very little qualms.
That's good. Ben, how you feeling about the 5?
I mean, I feel okay about it considering I've only seen 3 of the movies. Like I haven't seen Nyad or Color Purple, so
okay. I haven't seen The Color Purple. That's the only one out of here I haven't seen.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I said it last week, and I'm just throwing you the softball here, but America Ferrera is Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
That's what this nomination is.
1,000,000%. I was totally going to say that too. This is the Ruffalo of this year, and I think, or the spotlight Ruffalo of this year, and I think, much like Annette Bening's nomination, it does solidify that even though the voting body has gotten substantially whiter and younger and more diverse, they still hold on to that. We like who we like, and if you deliver a good monologue. Like, I know we talk all the time about when you get to this stage in the Academy Awards season of like, what's the moment? We talk about it with Dave I Enjoy Randolph. Like, what is the moment or the monologue or the speech that gets you that Academy Award nomination? Of course, for Mark Ruffalo and Spotlight, like, that was the moment. And so I think they still hold that very near and dear to their heart. And with America Ferrera, the monologue that she had, I think the social and cultural importance of that, I think they felt they needed to recognize that.
That definitely has to be a big factor into the nomination. And there are people that say that she wasn't really good in the movie outside of that scene. Obviously, that wasn't the performance that I talked about or I took away a lot from when I saw the movie. I've seen the movie multiple times and I love it. And I love that scene so much. I mean, that scene really is chef's kiss, 10 out of 10, no notes. But I don't want people online to think that the only reason she got nominated was because of that monologue. I don't want people to think that at all, because there are some subtle moments in that performance that really stuck out to me. She's a mother as well, and she's trying to have this good relationship with her child, and I like the performance. Again, I wouldn't have nominated her for an Oscar. I think it's cool that America Ferrera is an Oscar nominee. I think that's a win in its own, that she is an Academy Award nominee, because I never would have thought she would be an Academy Award nominee, because she's primarily a television performer and everything. So there's a win to it, but I can understand why some people are disappointed, especially considering that, she got nominated, Ryan got nominated, but the lead of the movie didn't get nominated. I can understand that some people are annoyed about that, but again, like, it's not the worst nomination out there. It really is far from the worst acting nom that we've gotten in a long time.
Sure. Ben, who else did you have predicted to be nominated? I can't remember what you put on the list.
Rachel McAdams. Are you there, guys? Me, Margaret. That's what I thought.
This is where that conversation gets a little dicey, because it feels like that could have been McAdams' spot. Like, that feels much more deserved, quote unquote, much more aligned with what this category necessitates or implies or warrants. I had Penelope Cruz and Ferrari and Julianne Moore in May December. May December goose eggs on any acting noms, which I think is pretty interesting. And it only gets one nomination in screenplay. I think we're all pretty aligned. Dave I Enjoy Randolph has this in the bag. She's won pretty much every single precursor. I'm pretty sure. I think her speech is going to be great. I'm very excited for her. And I just watched Rustin right before we recorded. Apparently she's in Rustin for like 2 minutes, which just incredible stuff. What a great year for her. I think Jodie Foster being nominated for Naiad, I don't have a huge problem with it. I think she's pretty good in that movie. I think Naiad is like an exceptionally average sports biopic that's just like not inspiring whatsoever.
But they nominated the wrong sports biopic this year. That's the thing. Like, they recognized the wrong sports biopic this year.
You want to know why? It's because they have a Netflix compact.
I know,
going on.
and it came out much earlier. That's the thing. It premiered at Telluride in August, and it got dropped on Netflix in November. At least it played somewhere. It even played at TIFF when I was there. I didn't see it there. I missed it at TIFF, but yeah, I just, like, they just recognized the wrong sports biopic. But I agree with you. I thought Jodie was actually really good in the movie. I thought she was quite good. And last night I started up the new season of True Detective, and she kicks so much ass on that. She's so good on that. And
she's great in that.
I'm really glad that we're in this time where Jodie Foster is making somewhat of a comeback, because I feel like she was gone for a little while. I mean, she had done some supporting performances, and obviously she's not the lead in Naiad, but it's a pretty big role, and now she's the lead in a pretty popular television series on HBO. So it's a good time to be a fan of Jodie Foster right now. I think like people who have been longtime fans of her, like this is like a great time for her because she's starring in True Detective and she's Oscar nominated for a movie. Like that's huge. That's a huge win.
Yeah. Big W for sure. Any closing thoughts on the Holdovers that we didn't talk about? I'm glad that we got the chance to cover it.
What is your favorite quote from the movie?
From the Holdovers? Well,
man.
Yeah.
That's tough. Probably I can't do it word for word, but it's whatever he says about basically if you don't have any physical exercise, the body starts to eat itself. And I just think that's hilarious coming from.
And then he like coughs up
Giammati.
like profusely.
So I think
it's so good.
Some really good acting.
It's so good.
I think I like the only tool in your room is you. I like that when he's talking shit about.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Bryan, thanks for being on the pod, man. I appreciate it. We had a good time talking about the Holdovers. If people want to find more of you, where can they find you at?
Of course, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm very glad that I got to talk about this movie with you guys. You could follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Bryan Sudfield, and you can subscribe to my podcast, Film Fragments, on any podcasting platform. I just had Ethan on a few weeks ago. It was a great discussion. Ben, please come on soon. I need you on like soon. Maybe you could top Ethan's appearance on it. So
we'll
have to see what happens.
Money.
You know what you should get on there and do, Ben? You should get on there. You should do Mark Ruffalo, and then you could do the spotlight bit.
Oh, hell yeah. I can take it over. It'll become my thing now.
Yeah, then you could outpass the belt to you.
It could have been me. It could have been you. It could have been all of us.
You could just, bring me on as a little guest appearance for sure. Go check out Bryan's podcast, Film Fragments. Super exciting stuff. Next week on the pod, we're going to try to answer the question, did she do it? As we talk about Anatomy of a Fall with Jonathan of The Film Drunk on Twitter. Excited to have Jonathan on. I'm excited to revisit Anatomy of a Fall. I haven't seen it since New York Film Festival a few months ago. So I'm very excited to talk about it, break it down a little bit. And I think it's going to be a great episode of the pod, Ben.
Yeah, I'm very excited. It's probably my most anticipated movie right now. So
Ooh.
I'm looking forward to it. What awards do you guys think the Holdovers are picking up at the Academy Awards? Is it going to win Best Picture? Let us know what you think. We are on Instagram and Twitter at 24 minutes of A24. We're also on YouTube at 24 minutes of A24, where you can watch all of our beautiful faces as we talk about these movies. Thanks so much, everyone, for your support. We appreciate it. I am Ben Lawhorn.
And I am Ethan Simi. Son of a bitch, that's another podcast.